Welcome to Re-Review, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we love the films from our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. It's the spookiest time of the year, so we're doing a special October movie month where each of us selects one Halloween-related film to re-review. Now that accounts for 3 films, so a randomizer is going to pick our 4th movie, and the 5th and final film will be known closer to October 31st. First up is Bobby's selection. We are watching Casper. It was released in 1995, directed by Brad Silberling, starring Bill Pullman, Christina Ricci, and Cathy Moriarty. This movie shows us that even you can make friends with ghosts. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 27-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. I look back on this film and I will tell you, as a kid, I wanted to watch this. Why? Because I was definitely intrigued by Casper. I was fairly confident. I remember watching the cartoon a lot. So I was into the idea of this, and I actually never saw this in my youth. So this was a first watching for me. And I think I had my expectations, and it hit some of those where this was a very like cartoony, campy feeling adventure, but with some really dark themes. Bobby, what made you pick this film? Because I found it interesting.
I picked this film because I am a total wimp. I am very afraid of scary movies. And so I thought maybe we should ease into this creepy month of Halloween and start out with something lighthearted before we jump into the more scary stuff.
I feel like lighthearted is a good way of calling it because as we were watching it, I think we mentioned some other films that we felt were kind of in the vein of Beetlejuice or Edward Scissorhands. It just had that same type of vibe.
I just didn't feel like feeling all scared and like crap for 2 hours tonight. So
I definitely think it's funny because mentioning Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands, it definitely has that aesthetic in a lot of ways. Like I could very easily, you could tell me that the set designer that did those ones did this one too. It very much has that feeling to it.
yeah, this was very like decorated, like there's
Right?
It was so artful, and like the house was just like crazy.
And maybe that's the part that we're keying in on is, we're introduced to the characters fairly early on. There's an idea Dr. Harvey, Bill Pullman, is trying to reconnect with his dead wife. Already a very dark theme coming in here that I was surprised by, going like, oh wow, this is a bit heavy. But you're right, we get introduced to the house as a character because it's, haunted by these ghosts that live there. And when they first walk in, you don't really see it early on, but the 2 kids you get at the intro who get scared out of the place. But when Dr. Harvey and Kat, Christina Ricci's character, walk into it, you see all the colors in the house. And I remember being shocked because, you think haunted house. I expected grays or like dark greens, mold, get the scariness going on. And this is very much a fun adventure house.
It definitely did have it did have a haunted vibe to it. It didn't skimp too far away from that. I mean, it had the cobwebs, it had the feeling of haunted, but it's not like it wasn't, creaky floorboards and, I couldn't imagine Pennywise chilling in this place. This wasn't a Pennywise house for sure.
Those cobwebs look like stage cobwebs. Come on. Come on.
That whole entry was so grand with like the staircase and like the gargoyles at the end of the staircase and all the stained glass. It was quite the house.
But I guess this is the question. So we're opened up to the idea that, this is supposed to be scary. If you were watching this in your youth, do you think you would have been scared at any point?
No, I don't think I was. I mean, I watched this in theaters as a kid. This is what 95. So I was still like a kid at the time. And
you were a baby.
I wasn't a baby. I was 95. So yeah, I was like 10 at the time. I don't think I was ever scared by anything. I do think that the movie opens in that tone of trying to be kind of like a scary movie. Like I think the very first thing that really happens, because you have like the kind of wind sounds and kind of like the kind of haunting sounds at the very beginning during the Universal logo. Then it morphs into a full moon and you get the pan down. And then like there's a sudden bike skid and you could tell like they're kind of going for a jump scare during that scene and just the overall vibe of it. But I think that the moment you see Casper, it kind of throws away the scary vibe of it. and that's probably intentional. I do think that strangely that this movie, like you said, was darker than I think was my expectation. It wasn't scary or anything like that, but I mean, there's a dude had his head flipped around in the opening sequence. So
yeah, let's talk about that, because that could kind of lead us in with talking about Casper as well. Because one of my notes that I wrote down was it reminded me of a Haunted Mansion, the ride, and we'll probably get to those points, and then also Luigi's Mansion, the video game. Thinking maybe there was some inspiration for the game from this movie. Thinking of Casper and thinking of some of the visual effects that we end up seeing, we get this scene that's set up where Kerrigan is hiring people to exorcise this house, and we have this priest who's dressed in his full exorcist gear with his cross and I think an orange and garlic for some reason, to go in and exorcise the demons, as they say. And we get a very, very violent interaction. Whereas I think up until that point, it seemed like these ghosts' intent was to just scare people. And this dude comes out with his head twisted completely backwards. But this is one of really, I feel like, more prominent visual effects that we saw. Secondly, outside of the initial introduction to the ghosts. So between that and then really seeing Casper, how did you feel about those visual effects?
Was Death Becomes Her before this? That totally felt like a nod to Death Becomes Her with the backwards head.
Things I don't know the answer to.
I feel like it's very similar to that
I'm
scene.
pretty sure that came out in 92. Death Becomes Her. So it had that vibe. The first thing I thought of was beyond the actual quality of it. I think the quality of the visual effects was kind of iffy. At first I think it was fine, and then kind of got worse, like where they're having trouble tracking it, I guess. But it very much had the vibe of The Exorcist, because she had like the green pea soup on him and then like that flipped head. So I very much was getting that, like a nod to The Exorcist, and it was like a Catholic priest and everything. So.
And how did you feel about Casper?
Visually?
Yeah.
I think personally, I thought it was okay. I actually went into this kind of wondering like how those visual effects were going to hold up, 20 some odd years later. I think that they went in a direction that kept him looking cartoony, but it still had like a tinge of reality to it. Like not real reality, but it felt...
There was more like depth and glow, and various things.
Yeah, the glow
is not not total 2D animation.
The glow was the thing that, with all of them, especially like the three uncles or whatever, I felt like the glow around them was the thing that kind of like did it for me as far as the visual effects.
And it seemed like there was a bit of refraction, like almost like how when you like dip your hand in Jello or water or something, like there was some kind of like blurring or distortion kind of behind them a little bit.
I definitely think for a 95, watching this as a 10-year-old, I would have been impressed by the visual effects. And I think for what it is, it held up. Like it didn't try to be, Industrial Light and Magic level T-Rexes running around type visual effects. I think for what it was pretty solid.
But I think you're answering, I was wondering if anyone would be a little more against what they did, but I really enjoyed it. I think I was a bit, everything you're describing, and even for me, I was bought into it. I do question certain things. If someone could explain to me how ghosts work, do you know how ghosts work? Because there's like this thing where they could like not touch stuff, but clearly touch stuff all the time. What are the rules when it comes to ghostum? Because I got very confused at parts with when things were passed through versus not passed through. How do they make these decisions?
No, it was definitely Toontown, where a cartoon doesn't fall down until they notice nothing's below them and they're about to fall, right? So it's basically like the physics and the reality of it kind of depended on the situation, because there was, like you said, all sorts of different things. Like sometimes they could pass through stuff, sometimes they couldn't. Like the magic vacuum, they got stuck but somehow got out of it, and otherwise could pass through everything but couldn't do some stuff and could do some stuff. Like they can wear glasses, and various other clothes, and they can create clothes from nothing. And they could pick up some stuff but pass through other stuff. So it was
the OJ that got me,
yeah.
where he catches the pulp in his hand while passing the juice through, and I'm going, wait a second.
Oh, the
Yeah,
thing that
no.
got me the most was the ability to form weapons out of their body and shoot bullets. Like I can kind of get being able to I don't know what the personnel I don't know the word for it, but being able to like transfer through stuff. But then like being able to form like these ghosts were literally like God mode. Like if they wanted to, they could have just taken over the world probably.
Yeah, it was really odd that they could create those killing machine weapons, yet they chose not to most of the time.
It was the mask. They could just do whatever they wanted whenever they wanted.
Knowing that the Stretch and Fatso and Stinky were fulfilling definitely a big comedy role, how did you feel about them as a group?
I don't know. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Some like it never got to a point where like I'm always afraid whenever it comes to comedies, more so with adult humor than with something like this that's obviously meant more for families, that the humor won't hold up, to the passage of time, as far as, things that we're looking back on with 2020 vision and saying like, oh no, that's horrifically offensive or whatever to modern perspective. But it never got to that level, with a couple little, exceptions. But I'd say like the comedy of them was a little bit abrasive for most of it. Like, meat bag and, all the stuff they would throw around. But there was the occasional one that would kind of be there, that almost when you think it probably wasn't in the script, but it was probably the voice actors throwing it in, most likely. I was like, oh, that was actually kind of good. It probably wasn't in the script at all,
So we have them as comedic relief, but there was something else the movie did that I think I was surprised by. So, Bobby, I'm going to challenge you here.
No.
In order of appearance, name every cameo. No, I'm kidding. But who surprised you the most in terms of the cameos? Because I felt like as it started we were getting hit left and right with very familiar faces.
Yeah, they had the mirror scene, which seemed to only exist for cameo purposes because there was nothing else like it in the whole rest of the movie. Like there was no other like any kind of morph transformation where they would show other faces in the other movie. It was only that one scene where it's like one cameo after the other. But I think my favorite was the Ghostbusters one. That was like kind of the most like out of left field kind of for me, but definitely like in that same world. And then of course, like with the vacuum scene, it was a total nod to Ghostbusters. So it was a lot of fun. And if there was actually a Ghostbuster, sure, why wouldn't you call them? I thought it was
Which
pretty
she
funny.
did.
Yes.
Which she did, and Dan Aykroyd said nope.
that was pretty good. I like that.
I mean, I like that they were able to pull that off, but it was very surprising. And for what's something that's a kid's film, that's definitely for all the adults that must have been sitting through the theater being like, I know these people.
It's almost kind of the humor that I expect from modern movies, and to an extent, where you'd get a random cameo like that. But it's definitely the kind of thing that you like. I remember when we watched it, I was like, this had to have like a major director or producer behind it to get this. Because I mean, we had Dan Aykroyd, Ben Stein, Clint Eastwood, Rodney Dangerfield, Mel Gibson, and randomly the Crypt Keeper.
Right.
Like someone was pulling some strings back there.
Yeah.
You say all these names, it's like the kids these days don't even know who you just listed.
It sounds like
Who?
corporate
What?
synergy to me.
Yeah, it probably is corporate synergy. Crypt Keeper is full HBO, right? Wasn't that HBO back in the
which
day?
is owned by Warner Brothers. Is this a Warner Brothers movie?
That was Universal, right?
Oh, is it Universal? Okay,
Yeah.
well, maybe I'm wrong.
Anyway,
Maybe it's
someone got
Universal.
paid. So we'll pivot back to the story, and I kind of want to talk about the idea of Dr. Harvey, his long desire to reconnect with his wife, but also the relationship with his daughter, Kat, and really this promise that he makes to her because he's dragging her around from country to country, state to state. Woo, I'm taking it very far. State to state, really upending her life for the purpose of being a ghost therapist. And there was something you keyed in on, Matt, that seemed very, very poignant in terms of the validity of his ghost therapiness.
The fact that it didn't seem like he actually even believed in ghosts. And he was generally surprised to see one, which I remember just thinking as that was happening, I'm like, he seems so surprised that I'm pretty sure he's probably been conning people up until now. Like, I mean, I guess in a way, I mean, he didn't really say it in any of the stuff, but he wasn't really giving therapy to the ghosts. He's giving therapy to the loved ones who were probably left behind. But yeah, for somebody who's like, oh, I'm a ghost therapist for the living impaired. It's kind of strange that you react that way to a ghost. And like, he almost was patronizing his daughter for even saying that ghosts are real.
Yeah, because we do get that moment where he walks through the room very much in that, like, oh, are you afraid of the monster? Let's see if we could find the monster in the room. Yeah, it was a bit painful for that. But as it kind of goes through the, she's trying to find her place in the world. She goes to a school where the entire class is a group of assholes who just want to make fun of her for every single, her existence.
And the teacher letting it happen.
Oh, the teacher started it. Let's not forget, the teacher started it. For being such I think a challenged character in a world where her dad is, quote unquote, off the reservation and she's being treated the way she was, she came across as very, likable in terms of she's going to be cool with hanging out with the ghosts. And I think there was an element of a question of, was she supposed to be goth or something in this film, even though she wasn't?
They could have very easily gone that route, I feel, especially casting Christina Ricci. I mean, this is post her, and, the Addams Family and stuff like that. So you could have very easily had gone that direction, but strangely, she was a lot more grounded than I thought she was going to be. And considering they almost had a perfect setup for it and didn't go for it. So either they intentionally did that to go against type, which might probably be the more likely scenario. Or maybe like they were going to go that route, and maybe, I don't know, even Christina Ricci or maybe her agent might have been like, we really don't want her typecast as the goth girl and everything. Please don't do this.
Right. I feel like I assigned in my head some of like the Addams Family to this movie because of her.
They did a good job of trying to avoid it then. Because it is hard to let go of the Addams Family. I do want to talk about our central character, even though not the central character, but enough, Casper. We have a character who, as we learned, all these ghosts are basically in a form of purgatory because they're hanging around. They have unfinished business that they need to attend to. And did we ever really learn what Casper's unfinished business was?
I guess the assumption was just the love of his dad or something like that. Or it could have been the sled ride because that's basically why he died. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was getting a girlfriend from the way the rest of the movie went.
Yeah, Casper had a very, very strong desire to meet a human woman.
Yeah, I did not remember that at all. That was a bit shocking.
Well, I mean, he converted himself into data and like transmitted through a phone line or cable line and was able to, basically kick off the entire movie, right? Like he's basically the driving force, the inciting incident, really, to get everything going. Though I do question, now that I'm thinking about it, how did they have cable in that house?
I just thought of the idea of if they, he gets into the phone line and he starts making modem sounds as himself, just so he could transfer himself as a data. I don't know how they had cable in the house. The whole house was a wreck, right? So what was happening there?
His dad invented cable. Was that it? Cable TV. It's funny because like, being a movie called Casper, this is kind of the thing that you see a lot in more modern movies where you have CG characters or even like, something like a movie like Godzilla, where you have these extraordinary things that are kind of the titular characters, but for whatever reason, in Godzilla's case, he can't talk, but you focus on the human characters more in a way. So like, I feel like this movie was much more about, in a way, Christina Ricci and her dad, Bill Pullman, than it was about Casper. Like I could honestly have forgotten most of what Casper's, character arc. Maybe that's the reason why we did forget about his ghost crush or whatever that was kind of driving everything. Is he wasn't particularly memorable in a lot of this. In hindsight, watching it, I'm like, yeah, I'd probably remember it more now because I see Casper from a different perspective now. But yeah, he's not as strong of a character as you would think, considering he's the titular one.
He wants a girlfriend, and then this is a little bit all dogs go to heaven. He makes a sacrifice so he can be Cinderella.
Yeah,
It's a bit odd. I was kind of expecting it to be due to his sacrifice, he gets to move on. And I was like, well, then they couldn't make a part 2. So what are they actually going to do? So when it became the Cinderella moment, I was like, how terribly sad is this?
Yeah, that was kind of a weird like sequence of events that led to it. Is, we had, this, I don't know if you would really even call it a MacGuffin, but it's definitely a driving device of the resurrection machine. What is the Lazarus machine? That's what it was called.
Yep. Lazarus.
That just kind of, it was just there. And as a result of it being there, to be honest, when I was watching this, I kind of thought it was going to be more about the treasure was going to be kind of like the thing that was kind of and it kind of was, but it was much more about the Lazarus machine. And we got this weird sequence of events where, they're like, oh, Kerrigan and Dibbs were like, okay, well, we need to get a safe. Well, the logical conclusion is to one of us die, sneak in, I guess, open it from the inside, hoping that there was some way to open it from the inside, and then take the treasure out, and then use the Lazarus machine to, come back as a human. And so
logical.
It just got this weird sequence of events where like somebody would be about to pull the lever, and then something else would happen, and then something else would happen to prevent it from happening. It was like this constant just interference in trying to make Casper into a human. Yeah, it was kind of a weird direction for it to go in a way. It was almost like a ticking time bomb, kinda.
Yeah.
Mechanism. A little bit.
I mean, by the time you're introduced to the room where this thing exists, they go through like a Rube Goldberg machine, basically, or some insane contraption that reminded me of Haunted Mansion, where they cycle through shaving, haircut, basically a death trap teeth brushing machine, just to get downstairs into this room where the fabled machine lives that Casper had to be reminded of because you forget things when you're dead, apparently. Looking at what Kerrigan character and how obsessed she was with the idea of the treasure, we still don't even understand how that character got their money, but maybe we're reading too much into the kids' film. Sometimes you just need an evil character that needs to steal the treasure, right?
It's true. It's kind of Goonies in a way like that, right?
Yeah. They didn't really explain like a whole lot of what happened there.
Minus her dying.
Yeah.
And coming back with her makeup intact.
And him apparently killing her.
Yeah, and then even with Dr. Harvey, we have the ghosts ready to commit murder with their weapons, and then he just dies, and he gets to be the resurrected human being, and as you said, he comes back fully clothed with glasses.
Again, the ghost logic in this movie, right?
Yeah, I mean, no one wants to see him come out naked, so.
But I mean, maybe we do.
There was stuff in this movie for adults, so gotta bring in that extra money at the box office.
Okay, so is there a ramped up version of this movie? Is there a what if we made Casper scarier?
Like the character or the movie as a whole?
A little bit of both.
I was thinking this while we were watching it, and I think that it was meant to be the central theme of it, but I think that the cartoonishness of it kind of got in the way at times, which is the idea of coping with loss. Like everyone in this movie to some extent was supposed to be coping with loss. I mean, obviously with Dr. Harvey and Kat, with the loss of, the mom and the wife. And then even Casper, with just, his own loss and very much remembering his dad and like what his dad went through after his death. I mean, that in and of itself was very tragic, ending up declared insane and basically dying on it, by himself
so sad.
Yeah. God. And like, there's just this element of it to it that I feel like if you wanted to go in a less cartoonish route, you could focus more on that aspect. I don't know about the scary side of it as much. I mean, I could definitely see you could take the core elements of this, which is boy dies, haunts house with 3 other evil ghosts, family moves in, you know, death surrounds everyone in this situation or whatever. Like, you could very easily take those elements and put it inside of a much darker movie. In fact, there probably is. I'm sure there's probably a House on Haunted Hill sequel with that same premise. So I think you could. I don't know if it's Casper, but it's weird because this whole thing's based off of Casper cartoons. I remember them being pretty creepy as a kid growing up. So I think you could, but I don't know if you'd get the same dollars with all the kids showing up that you probably would have if you would have done it that way.
Just say it's not for you. This is Casper for adults. Bobby, you want to remake this one? Make it a little scarier?
That's certainly an option. The scary TV show. The Halloween special.
The CW version?
Yeah.
Now you're talking about language. Just a really cheesy TV show. As always, just give me a TV show. Make it last like 24 episodes. Maybe scare me sometimes, only a little bit, but not really.
They could have the new ghost of the week. Every week somebody dies. Some like special like celebrity cameo.
Well, we've watched it. We know this is a film that's geared towards kids with definitely some references there for the adults. You know, Bobby, you telling families to sit by the television, crank out the popcorn and watch this one?
Well, the funny thing is that I feel like there's a very small window of where your kids, this is going to work for them because too young, and I feel like these jokes and various other things are just a little over the top. Like, my 7-year-old daughter would want nothing to do with this movie. But if she gets too old, it might not be her thing either. So it's got to be the sweet spot. So you got to find that sweet spot and enjoy it as a family.
What about for you, Matt?
I think I agree. I think that if you have the right family dynamic, I don't know, maybe in like the 10 to 12 range, maybe. I think that this would be a good movie to maybe sit down and watch. I have fond memories of having this on VHS and popping it in and watching it with my family. So I think that if you can get that sweet spot, I think it's worth it. Otherwise, yeah, I don't know if the fraternity guys are going to be enjoying this. This is this is a family movie through and through, I think.
You know, that's the part that gets me in back to those original references to the idea of Beetlejuice or maybe Edward Scissorhands. There's something about it that does feel wholesome, but I feel you. Those are some dark themes. So maybe kick it with your younger teenager. Your 22-year-old is going to ask, "What's wrong with you, Dad? Why are we watching this movie?" So I think it's still worth watching. Put it on in that sweet window that we're looking for. So as always, thank you for listening. Remember, you can call them ghosts if you want, but we call them the living impaired.